I don't know why I'm in here. That's the first thing you need to understand. People say that all the time in prison. Innocence is the national anthem of the damned. But I mean it. I don't know what crime put me here. They tell me it was something terrible, something depraved, something about my stepmother. I just have one problem with that. I never had a stepmother. The first few weeks I thought it was some kind of clerical error. Maybe I was mixed up with another guy, some poor bastard with a similar name, caught up in a legal nightmare. I told the lawyer they assigned me that I had never, in my entire life, had a stepmother. She just looked at me like I was a bug she wanted to scrape off her shoe. The evidence says otherwise, she replied coldly, and the jury believed her testimony. Testimony. Her testimony. I tried to ask who she was, but my own lawyer refused to tell me. She gave me that blank, bureaucratic smile and said, "You already know who." But I didn't. I sat through a trial that felt like white noise. Listened to people take the stand and talk about my obsession with a woman I don't remember existing. My father. They said he remarried years ago. My childhood home. They said she had lived there. I had lived with her. I had loved her. That's what they told me. And yet, when I close my eyes, I can't summon a face. I can't picture the house with anyone other than my father and me. There are no wedding photos, no old family albums where she appears, no anniversary cards. So why does everyone believe she was there? Why do I sometimes hear her voice in my head, whispering my name like a breath of wind through an open door? They sent me to Blackridge Correctional Facility, a concrete tomb filled with men who had done far worse than whatever they said I had done. I was placed in cell 144, a narrow rectangle of damp walls and a single iron cot. My cellmate, Reggie, was the kind of guy who looked at you like he was measuring how much weight it would take to crush your skull. But he wasn't my biggest problem. She was. The first night, I woke up to the sound of someone breathing right next to my bed. Not Reggie. His heavy snores rattled from the top bunk, deep and oblivious. This was something else, something close, something light, something deliberate. Like a woman exhaling softly in the dark. I turned my head slowly. My breath hitched. There was a shape sitting in the metal chair by the door. A woman's silhouette barely visible in the murky glow from the security light outside. Watching me. I couldn't move. My pulse pounded in my skull, screaming at me to bolt, to cry out, to do something. But I just lay there, paralyzed, staring at the figure. And then, just as the cold sweat started soaking into my mattress, she stood up. A slow, graceful movement, like her bones bent the wrong way. I slammed my eyes shut, held my breath, counted to 10 like a child scared of the monster in his closet. When I opened them, the chair was empty. The only proof she had ever been there was a strange, familiar scent in the air. Something floral, something rotten. It made my stomach turn. It made me think of something, someone I should remember, but don't. It got worse after that. The whispers started. Late at night, when the prison was silent except for the occasional shuffle of guards, I would hear her voice. "Do you miss me? I know you still love me. Say my name." I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just the isolation, the stress, the guilt of a crime I didn't even understand. But then Reggie woke up screaming. It was the third week. He sat bolt upright, gasping, his massive chest heaving. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" I snapped, my nerves shredded. He turned to me, wild-eyed. His mouth opened and closed like he couldn't get the words out. Finally, in a hoarse whisper, he said, "She was standing over you, man. Just standing there, watching." A cold wave passed over me. I swallowed. "Who?" Reggie's lip trembled. I don't know, man. Some woman. Thought it was a nurse or some shit at first, but..." He cut himself off, shaking his head. I gripped the edge of my cot. "What did she look like?" His face twisted. "That's the thing, man. I can't remember." He pressed a hand to his forehead, as if trying to force the memory out. "I see her in my head, but she's all wrong, blurry, like I'm trying to picture a dream from years ago." He shuddered, but I know she was smiling. A sick feeling curdled in my stomach. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't tell Reggie what scared me most. It wasn't that he saw her. It was that he couldn't remember her face either. Just like me. Just like everyone else. The nightmares started after that. Not the usual kind. Not the ones that leave you shaky but relieved when you wake up. No, these were different. These were memories that never happened. The first time I was standing in my childhood home. Everything exactly as I remembered it. My father's old recliner by the TV. The smell of lemon cleaner in the air. But something was wrong. The kitchen table. There were 3 chairs instead of 2. And she was sitting there. I still couldn't see her face. It was blurred, like a photo smudged by an oily fingerprint. But I felt her staring. "Come eat, sweetheart," she said, patting the seat next to her. I couldn't move. I knew something waited for me in that chair, something worse than death, worse than prison. I tried to speak, to ask who she was, but the words caught in my throat, because I already knew. And then the dream changed. The walls peeled like rotten fruit, curling away to reveal something else beneath. Raw, blackened bone, twitching like it was alive. The furniture rotted before my eyes, disintegrating into piles of writhing maggots. And she was still sitting at the table, untouched, smiling. She reached out, her fingers impossibly long, curling toward my throat. I woke up choking. Reggie was already up, pacing, eyes darting to the corners of the cell. His skin was gray, sunken, like he hadn't slept in days. "I heard her last night," he muttered. I wiped sweat from my forehead, still gasping. "Who?" He gave me a look. "You know who?" I swallowed hard. "What did she say?" His jaw tightened. He stared at the wall, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. She whispered in my ear, asked me if I remembered her. A chill slid down my spine. "Do you?" Reggie flinched, like he wanted to say yes, like something was clawing at his brain, trying to let itself in. But he just muttered, "I don't want to talk about it." I didn't either. We were only allowed 1 phone call a week. I never bothered. Who the hell would I even call? But after that dream, after that night, I had to try. I called my father. The phone rang for so long I thought he wasn't going to pick up, but then there was a soft click. A voice, distant and cracked with age. "Hello?" My throat was dry. "Dad?" Silence. Then, a sharp inhale. "Son?" He sounded relieved, like I'd called him back from the dead. I gripped the receiver. My fingers felt ice cold. "Dad, I need to ask you something." "What is it?" I hesitated. How do you even phrase a question like this? But I had to know. "Did you ever remarry?" The line went silent. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. "Dad, did you?" "No," he said, his voice flat like a deadbolt clicking shut. I exhaled, my head spun. "Are you sure?" A sharp sound, like a static pop. And then, he said something that made my skin crawl. "She's listening, son." A long breath rasped over the line. Not my father's. Something female. I froze, my blood turned to ice. I was about to hang up when I heard a soft, familiar whisper. "Come home, sweetheart." The line went dead. I stopped sleeping after that. It didn't help. One night, I was lying awake staring at the cracked ceiling when I heard a knock. Not at the door, inside the wall. I shot up, heart hammering. The knock came again, a soft, deliberate rhythm. I turned to Reggie's bunk, empty. The sheets were soaked red. A heartbeat of silence. Then, a voice from inside the wall. "She's not your stepmother." I lunged out of bed, backing against the opposite wall. Who's in there?" My voice came out hoarse. Something scraped inside the concrete. A whispering shuffle like fingernails dragging against stone. "You have to remember," the voice rasped. My breath hitched. The air felt thick, suffocating. "I don't know what you mean." A sudden, sharp crack splintered through the wall. a crack spreading like veins. And then, through that tiny sliver of darkness, I saw something move. Not a person, not human. A shape that shouldn't exist. Something trying to push through. I stumbled back, slammed my fist against the cell door. "Guard! Somebody!" The thing behind the wall laughed. Not a human laugh, not a voice. A sound like dry leaves scraping over bone. The next thing I remember is the guards dragging me out of my cell, my fists bloody from pounding on the door. Reggie was gone. His bunk was clean, no sheets, no blood, no proof he had ever been there. When I asked where he was, the guard just blinked at me. Who? I'm running out of time. I don't know what's real anymore. I dream of her every night, of a life I don't remember, of her hands touching my face. And when I wake up, my skin still burns where she touched me. She wasn't my stepmother, but she wants me to believe she was. And the worst part? I think it's working. The first physical proof that she was real came 2 nights after Reggie disappeared. I was in the showers. Blackridge has one of those communal shower blocks. No stalls, no privacy. Just a row of rusted shower heads lined up like executioners. Most guys showered in groups for safety. I didn't. I'd already learned that the real danger didn't come from the inmates. The water was hot enough to scald. I let it run down my back, trying to shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Then I felt it. Raise, something soft sliding over my bare feet. Hair. Long black strands curling around my toes. My stomach turned. I took a step back. The strands followed, tangled around my ankles, wet and heavy. I looked up. The water pouring from the rusted showerhead had changed. It wasn't clear anymore. It was dark, thick. It smelled like something had been buried in the earth too long. And something was moving inside it. I bolted, slipping on the tile, barely catching myself before I hit the floor. My heart slammed against my ribs. I ran. Didn't even turn the water off. Didn't even look back. I barricaded myself in my cell. Didn't talk to anyone. Didn't eat. The next night, I forced myself to stay awake. It didn't matter. Sometime in the dark, my body betrayed me. I woke up to fingers sliding through my hair. Slow, deliberate strokes. A lover's touch. My body locked up. My breath came in shallow, silent gasps. I couldn't turn around, but I could feel her behind me. Pressed against my back, her breath warm against my ear. "You're finally remembering," she whispered. My entire body seized. I jerked forward, spun, swung my fist. Nothing. The cell was empty, but the mattress beside me was still warm. And when I sat up, I felt something sticky on my pillow. I turned on the dim overhead light. My stomach flipped. A clump of long black hair sat beside me, strands still wet. I snapped, screamed at the guards, demanded they move me to solitary. They didn't argue. A guy screaming about phantom women touching him in his sleep? Yeah, that's a fast track to the hole. They threw me in a windowless cell with nothing but a steel cot and a drain in the floor. It didn't help. I lasted one night. Because she followed me. It started with a sound. A slow, wet slurping. At first, I thought it was my own breathing. Then I realized it was coming from the drain. Something was squeezing through. I scrambled back against the wall, my pulse hammering. The slurping sound grew louder, wetter, and then fingers. Pale, thin fingers pushed out of the drain hole, bending at impossible angles. Then an arm. Then her face. She shouldn't have fit. Her shoulders cracked and folded inward, forcing herself through the tiny opening. Her head twisted at a grotesque angle, too wide, too wrong. But she was still smiling. My vision blurred. I tried to scream, but the sound died in my throat. She dragged herself out of the drain inch by inch. One arm, then the other, and then she lifted her head. This time I saw her face. And I remembered. She wasn't my stepmother. She was something else. Something older than me, older than my father. Something that had been waiting. I saw flashes, memories that weren't mine. A house that no longer existed. A bedroom lit by candlelight. a woman, sitting at the edge of my bed, whispering lullabies in a language I didn't understand. A promise made in the dark. You will be mine forever. And now, she was here to collect. Her fingers curled toward my face. And this time, I couldn't move. When they pulled me out of solitary, I was convulsing. I don't remember much, just flashes of my body being dragged down the hall. White fluorescent lights. Someone shouting, "What the fuck is wrong with him?" And beneath it all, the sound of her laughter. They put me in psych lockdown. I don't blame them. I wouldn't believe me either. But here's the thing. I'm not the only one. The guy in the cell next to me, he sees her too. He leans close to the wall, whispering to me at night. Says she visited him years ago. Says she waits until you're weak, until you start to forget who you are. And then she takes you. She's not your stepmother, he says, voice thin with fear. She's not anyone's stepmother. I press my forehead against the cold wall, my breathing shaky. Then what is she? I whisper. His voice trembles. She's a bride, looking for a groom. I stopped fighting. I stopped running. I let her in. I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the dreams that weren't dreams anymore. Or maybe it was because I started remembering. The first thing I remembered was her touch. Not like the cold, wet hands that brushed over me in the dark. No. Before that, before prison, before I was even born. She had touched me in the womb. A shadow coiling around my mother's stomach. A whisper in the dark. A promise made before I took my first breath. You will belong to me. The second thing I remembered was her smell. Not the rotten stench from the drain. Not the mildew of prison walls. It was floral, sweet, honeysuckle and burning wood. A scent older than memory, older than me. And the last thing I remembered was that I had never been alone. Not really. She had always been watching, and I had always been hers. It happened in the middle of lockdown. I was lying awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound of her breathing, waiting for her fingers to slide into my hair. But this time, she didn't wait until I was asleep. This time, she didn't creep through the walls or slither through the drain. She just appeared. I blinked and she was sitting on the edge of my cot. I could see her face clearly now. She wasn't blurred, wasn't shifting, wasn't something my mind refused to recognize. She was beautiful, not in a normal way, not in a way that made sense. She had too many teeth, too many joints in her fingers. Her hair moved like it was caught in a current no one else could feel. But she was mesmerizing. She smiled. "You're ready now," she whispered. I exhaled, closed my eyes, and whispered back, "Yes." Her lips were cold. Not like a corpse. Like the space between moments, like the air just before a lightning strike. It burned. I felt my mind unraveling, pieces of myself peeling away. Memories, real memories, cracking, dissolving, rewritten. My father? I barely remembered his face. My childhood? All I could see was her. Sitting at the dinner table, braiding my hair, smiling as she watched me sleep. She had always been there. I just forgot. She pulled away and I gasped, but I had no lungs anymore. I wasn't in Blackridge prison anymore. I wasn't in my body. I was somewhere else. There was no sky, no walls, just an endless shifting black, like I was floating inside a space too vast to understand. And she was holding me. Her arms wrapped around me, her fingers threaded through my ribs like I was made of silk. She pressed her lips against my forehead. "You are mine now," she whispered. And I felt it. The last piece of myself fade away. The next morning, they found my body. Still lying in my cot, eyes open, unblinking. A faint smile on my lips. They said I must have died in my sleep. The guards were confused. I was healthy. No signs of distress. It was like I had just let go. But here's the thing. I wasn't gone. I was watching. Watching from the dark spaces between moments. from the corner of the cell where the cameras didn't reach. And she was with me, holding me, whispering to me. Forever. Weeks passed. A new inmate moved into my cell. A young guy, wide-eyed, nervous. He didn't know what had happened before. Didn't know what still lurked in the cracks of reality. And one night, just before he fell asleep, I whispered into his ear, "Do you remember me?" His whole body jerked. His breathing went sharp. And somewhere in the endless black, I felt her smile. The hunt had begun again. You let her take you. Now you're part of her world. A ghost in the spaces between moments. A whisper in the ears of the next victim. And worst of all, you don't even remember wanting anything else. She has you. Forever.